Hi friends, host Eric here, Tiger with Fans People. I want to respond to this guy, Tyler Durden. Sorry, but if anybody thinks they're schooling Ben Shapiro, they're probably deluding themselves. The dude is smart, plain and simple. Okay, well, first of all, watch the video. I'm not asking you to say that I am able to school him. I'm asking you to critique whether I actually do school him in that video. You don't have to probably it, right? I either am deluding myself or I'm not. So you can watch the video and determine that if you'd like. However, just for good measure, I'll do it again. What does he do here? First, he strawmans the fuck out of Don Lemon. Don Lemon makes the comment that enough of the thoughts and prayers. The federal government needs to do something, or somebody needs to do something because of this guy slipped through federal gun laws and got a gun and shot up some people. Ben Shapiro attacks this on the ground that that's not how prayer works. That we don't pray because we expect God to save us from this stuff. God's not a gumball machine. And that's all well and good, but that's not his point. His point is your response should entail some sort of action, not merely thoughts and prayers. And his critique may or may not be valid, but it's silly and unnecessary to reduce it to something that it's not, which is a misconception of the nature of prayer. Let's watch a little bit and see what else he's got going on here. What nonsense he's got going on.
About what prayer actually does. So I'm going to be completely sincere here. I have a difficult time praying. I pray 3 times a day. It's not something that I particularly enjoy doing because in Judaism, prayer can be relatively formulaic. When I say relatively, I mean very formulaic. You say the same prayer 3 times a day. The idea is that it's supposed to be almost like a mantra. It's supposed to provide you a leaping off point to actually think about God and think about your relationship with Him. But prayer can be very difficult unless you're actually just sitting there concentrating on what the purpose of prayer is. So I've really done a lot of thinking for myself, about what I think prayer does, particularly prayer in the aftermath of tragedy. I think that prayer does really 3 things. I think prayer does 3 things. First, it reminds us that while it is our job to strive to...
Okay, so note, he's critiquing the legitimacy of prayer after a tragedy. But that's not what Don Lemon is talking about. He's not saying it's not legitimate to pray. He's suggesting that the response of people not directly affected by the tragedy, who respond by saying thoughts and prayers, that's not a good enough response. They ought to take political action. I think there's ample room to critique Don Lemon's point there, and to critique it well. I would point out that many people prefer to express compassion and solidarity with the victims as a means of feeling as though they've done something, and while Don Lemon may believe that a given political action is a more appropriate response, number one, that's a point in dispute. We can't assume that your legislative action that you may or may not be advocating for is going to have any impact on the situation. And number two, just because bad things happen doesn't mean that we need to take some sort of action at all necessarily. And 3, to the extent that action does need to be taken by a we, it might possibly need to be taken by a local group that doesn't have anything to do with those of us sitting far away and commenting on it. So there's lots of reasons why Don Lemon's notion that we ought not offer our thoughts and prayers in solidarity with those affected by tragedies is a bad notion. None of them have anything to do with what prayer is for, because that's not what Don Lemon is saying. That's not the argument he's making. And if Ben Shapiro wants me to respect him at least, he's going to have to do better than a weak-ass straw man that he then proceeds to articulate a bunch of details about as though winning the fuck out of that node mattered, given the fact that the whole node is invalid because it's fallacious. So, Tyler Durden, you be as impressed with Ben Shapiro as you like. But I'm not. Thanks for watching Talking to Famous People. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.